In today's video, we're talking creatine. Welcome to the video, guys. My name is Tyler, also known as the Fit Chemist, and I help people take control of their lives by taking control of their fitness and nutrition habits so that ultimately we can lead healthier and happier lives. So if you are new here, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Please consider subscribing, turning those notification bells on so you don't miss when I post a new video. And if you are returning, I'm so glad to see you again. In the last video, I talked about making your own pre-workout so you guys can save some cash. So if you haven't done that already, go ahead and check that out now. But at the end of that video, I talked about one particular supplement that could be included in your pre-workout, but timing doesn't necessarily matter. And I wanted to do more of a deep dive on it. And that supplement is creatine. The reason that I shared this in a separate video is because it is one of the most researched supplements and arguably the most popular supplement on the market today. Seriously, as we'll see through this video, there are so many papers that unfortunately I do not have time to sit here and break down each one of them. Usually what I'll do in previous videos is I'll go through the methods of a paper, what the results are, and then what the takeaways are, but we just don't have the time to do that with all of these studies today. So what I do instead is I'll put up a screenshot of the paper, and then down below I'll actually link the paper as well. I think a lot of them are open access papers, so if you want to know more information, you can go ahead in that description box, click the paper and read it yourself. The ones that aren't open access, feel free to reach out to me. I should have access to them through the university, and I'd be more than happy to send them to you. Before we get into it, I want to make it very clear, like I did in the last video, that I am not a licensed medical professional. So if you're thinking about taking creatine, please consult your doctor first. And second, if you're looking for more information, a great resource that I mentioned in that last video as well is examine.com. So you literally just go to that website, type in whatever supplement you're looking for. So in this case, we do creatine, and it'll pop up. It'll give you the efficacy, the dose, all the studies associated with that particular supplement. So if there's something that I missed in this video, feel free to check out that resource and make sure you bookmark that website for future supplements. But with that, let's get into it. What is creatine? Creatine is a molecule that readily converts to creatine phosphate, which can then react with ADP or adenosine diphosphate to make adenosine triphosphate or ATP, which is the energy currency in your cell. So that's what your body uses for energy. So the thought process here is that if you saturate your muscles with creatine phosphate, that when your body needs energy, it can very readily produce that ATP, and that will help with muscle contractions. And if you can have more energy from muscle contraction, you can lift heavier weights, and over the long term, eventually you'd get bigger and stronger. Creatine can be obtained from your diet, although it's usually in small quantities and it's not enough to reap the benefits. So if you're eating red meat and fish, you will get some small amounts of this, but like I said, it's nowhere near the recommended dose, especially if you are a vegetarian and you're not consuming those things. You're probably not getting very much creatine in your diet at all. So that brings us to the next point. What are the benefits? Since creatine is turning into creatine phosphate and eventually ATP, again, that's the energy currency of your cell, this should help with anaerobic exercise, which of course that is something like resistance training or very short bouts of exercise, so maybe something like sprinting. But if you are supplementing with creatine, studies have shown that it can help increase fat-free mass or lean body mass. It can help improve strength, and it can also help with fatigue resistance. So again, all of these are related to resistance training. So that's probably why it's like one of the most well-taken supplements and also one of the most well-researched, because who doesn't want to get bigger and stronger in the gym? And this is just one of those powerhouse supplements that you probably should be taking. One thing to note that's not necessarily a benefit, but something you should be aware of, is that creatine is associated with water retention. So oftentimes when you start supplementing with creatine, you will see your weight increase a little bit on the scale. Again, that's just because you're holding more water weight. That's something to be aware of, because if you're in the middle of a diet and you start supplementing with creatine and you see your weight going up, some people will freak out and be like, oh my God, I need to drop calories again because I just gained a bunch of fat. When in reality, it's not actually fat and it's just water. So please keep that in mind. But let's say you're someone like me right now who's bulking. I am taking creatine already, but let's say I wasn't and I started and I do see a bump in the scale. Of course, that's kind of the goal of a bulk, so it's not something to worry about if you are bulking. It's more so something to worry about when you're cutting. Besides that though, that's pretty much the only downside, and I wouldn't even say that as a downside. One thing that's frequently touted, or was frequently touted until it was disproven, is that creatine can harm your kidneys, but I want to get into that. Does creatine harm your kidneys? If you have healthy kidneys, no, it doesn't. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence that shows this. So in the description box, I'll put 8 different studies and I'll throw them up on screen right now. They're both short-term and long-term, and they show that creatine does not have any impact on your kidneys. So that was a big myth maybe like 15 years ago or before that it could do that, but there's really nothing to worry about if you have healthy kidneys. There have been studies on people that have kidney issues, and creatine supplementation does still seem to be safe for those people, albeit there's not really any long-term studies for those individuals, so it's something to be somewhat cautious of. So what I'd recommend here is first consult with your doctor. Like I said before, I'm not a licensed medical professional, like I can't do that for you. Talk to your doctor. If they approve it, what I would do is then start with the minimum recommended dose of creatine, which is 3 grams per day. Start taking that, see if you have any adverse side effects, and of course, if you are, stop taking creatine. But if you're okay with that minimum dose, maybe you can bump it up to 4 grams a day and eventually 5 grams a day, which is like the pretty standard supplementation dose for creatine. I have included a nice little screenshot from examine.com. Again, this website is like the gold standard for supplements. Anything you want to know, you can go on that website and check it out. But what they did was they compiled a table. So if you have healthy kidneys or if you have kidney issues, they have recommended dosages of creatine for you and sort of like what the directions and precautions are when taking creatine. So feel free to pause the video. You can take a screenshot of that, or I will link it down below. You can go ahead and click that link and then just see the article that I took this from. They have tons of information about how creatine impacts your kidneys, or let's say it doesn't impact, because we can now see that there's overwhelming evidence that it does not harm your kidneys. This supplement is safe to take. How much creatine should I take, and do I need to load creatine? The recommended dose for creatine is 0.02 grams per pound of body weight, which usually comes out anywhere between 3 to 5 grams per day. So for me, I'm 170 pounds right now, so that comes out to about 3.5 grams per day. I personally take 5 grams per day just because it's easy to measure out on the scale when I'm putting it into my protein shake. There's really no other reason other than that, and it's super cheap. So like adding that extra 1.5 grams is not really gonna have that big of an impact on my wallet. To reap the benefits of creatine, you do have to get to that saturation point so that your muscles are saturated with creatine and creatine phosphate so that they can then get converted to ATP. So there's 2 ways that you can do this. One, you can do a creatine load, which would be taking 20 to 25 grams of creatine for about 5 to 7 days, and that should get you to the saturation point. Although I will say some studies have shown that there is a little bit of GI distress and some bloating associated with the load. So you'd get there faster, but you do risk bloating. So that's sort of like a personal preference up to you. What I would recommend is just taking that 3 to 5 grams per day for about 3 to 4 weeks. That should get you to the saturation point. And then once you get to that saturation point, you just keep supplementing with that 3 to 5 grams per day, and then you'll just have the benefits from there on out. When should I take creatine? As we just talked about, really what's the most important is getting your muscle cells saturated with creatine, and as a result, that means timing doesn't necessarily matter. You can take it pre-workout, you can take it post-workout, it doesn't matter if you take it with or without carbs. You just need to get it into your system at some point in the day so that you can keep those muscle cells saturated with creatine. There were some studies in the past that showed there was a slight benefit to taking it post-workout, and that's what I do, but really that's just out of convenience. So when I come home, I just make a protein shake. I have a piece of fruit too, and it's just easy for me to throw my creatine in that protein shake. I don't have to worry about getting it in some point later in the day. But again, that's just out of convenience. If you want to put it in your pre-workout, you can do that. You can see that some commercial pre-workouts have creatine in them, so then you can get your dose that way. Again, it really doesn't matter. It just matters that you get it in at some point during the day. What type of creatine is best? So if you go on the old Google machine and you type in creatine, usually what will pop up is creatine monohydrate, but there are also a bunch of other variants. So you have creatine ethyl ester, creatine HCl, you have buffered creatine. So essentially what these companies are doing is they're taking a very bland supplement like creatine monohydrate, and they're just trying to make these fancy variants of it so that they can get better marketing and more money in their pockets. Studies have shown that creatine ethyl ester is actually inferior to creatine monohydrate, and that buffered creatine is no better than creatine monohydrate. So there's no reason to really buy those. If you want to waste more money on those, feel free to do so, but creatine monohydrate is just as good as all those other variants, and it's the cheapest option out there. So again, if you want to spend more money on some of those other variants, feel free. Probably wouldn't do it with creatine ethyl ester because it's not as good as monohydrate, but again, that's going to be up to you. Creatine monohydrate is just the tried and true version, so I just don't see any reason to buy anything other than that. I usually buy a 1 kilogram bag, so I actually just realized that this has been sitting here the whole time because I was taking some thumbnail photos, but shameless plug, you can go to bulksupplements.com. You can pick yourself up a bag of creatine. I think this is like $20 or something ridiculously cheap. And you can save 5% by using the code FITCHEMIST. So go ahead, do that now. I'd appreciate some of that support. So that's the deep dive on creatine, guys. I will also link a Stronger by Science article down below and an Iron Culture podcast. So if you guys are looking for more information, feel free to check those links out. And of course, I linked all the studies down below. So there's just like endless amounts of information down there for you guys to check out. But if there's something I missed in this video, feel free to drop a question down below. I'd be more than happy to help you guys out and answer those questions for you. But I hope that you learned something today. I hope that I displayed all the wonderful benefits of creatine and hopefully convinced you guys that if you are not taking the supplement already, it's probably time to start. Alright guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below. And again, if you are new here, be sure to subscribe. Turn those notification bells on because I post new videos every single Friday. You do not want to miss when they go live. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.